They say pride comes before a fall. But in my 12 years on the force, I've never seen someone trip over their own ego quite as hard as Karen did last Tuesday. Most people see a police interceptor and think twice. Karen, she saw a challenge. She didn't just want my parking spot. She wanted to prove she owned the entire street. What she didn't realize was that by towing my unmarked unit, she wasn't just stealing a car. She was intercepting an active federal investigation. By the time this 15-minute story ends, you'll see exactly how a single parking dispute turned into a multi-agency raid that dismantled her entire life. It started at 2:15 p.m. I was sitting in an unmarked Ford Explorer outside an aging apartment complex. I was on a stakeout, tracking a lead in a local fraud case. My police issue permit was clearly visible on the dash, and I was in full uniform minus the hat. Then she appeared. I rolled down the window. There she was, Karen, clad in a neon pink tracksuit, clutching a latte like it was a scepter. "You out now?" she screeched. "No hello, no excuse me. Just pure, unadulterated entitlement." I kept my cool. "Ma'am, I'm on official business. I'll be out of here in 10 minutes. She didn't care. To her, this wasn't a public road. This was her spot because it was closest to the lobby. "Official business? You look like a mall security guard in a rental. Move this junk or I'll have it scrapped." I tried to show her my badge. I tried to explain the legality of public easements. But arguing with a Karen is like trying to teach a cat algebra. It's a waste of time, and it just makes the cat mad. She pulled out her phone and hit speed dial. "Jimmy, get the truck down here. We've got another trespasser." I thought she was bluffing. She wasn't. 2 minutes later, a rusted-out tow truck from Jimmy's recovery swung around the corner. Jimmy, a guy who looked like he'd lose a fight to a wet paper bag, didn't even look at me. He just started backing up to my front bumper. "Stop," I yelled, stepping out of the car. "This is government property. If you hook this vehicle, you are interfering with a police operation." Karen stepped between me and the truck. She actually laughed. "Police operation? Please. My husband plays golf with the mayor. You're lucky I don't have you arrested for impersonating an officer." Before I could radio for backup, Jimmy hit the lift. My front wheels left the ground. My service radio, my laptop with encrypted files, and a confidential folder containing the names of local informants were all locked inside that car. I reached for my ID again, but Karen swiped at my hand, knocking my badge into the gutter. "Go play dress-up somewhere else," she barked. Jimmy floored it. My car, and all that sensitive evidence, disappeared around the corner in a cloud of diesel smoke. I was standing there, a uniformed officer on a suburban sidewalk with no car, no radio, and a badge in the mud. But here's the twist Karen didn't see coming. My dashcam was still recording. And the husband she kept bragging about. His name was the first one on the list in that confidential folder. The war had officially begun. I stood there for a second, staring at the empty street. No car, no radio, just a badge covered in sidewalk dirt. I had to hitch a ride to Jimmy's recovery and towing, a place that looked more like a graveyard for stolen dreams than a legitimate business. When I walked into the grease-stained office, Karen was already there. She was leaning against the counter, laughing with a guy who looked like he hadn't showered since the 90s. Jimmy. "Oh, look," Karen smirked, pointing a manicured finger at me. "The fake cop followed us home. Did you bring your plastic handcuffs, Officer Doofy?" I ignored her and looked at Jimmy. "Release the vehicle. Now, you've interfered with a police operation, and every second that car stays on your lot, your legal liability grows." Jimmy didn't even flinch, he just chewed on a toothpick. Lot fee is 500, towing fee is 300, storage fee, well, that just started. Total $1,000, cash only, no ID, no car. I am a sergeant with the precinct, I growled. Check the plates, check the registration. Jimmy leaned in, his breath smelling like stale cigarettes. I don't care if you're the Pope. Karen says you're a fake, and in this town, what Karen says goes. I finally managed to get a hold of my station on a burner phone. I expected my captain to send a SWAT team to level the place. I expected sirens and justice. But when Captain Miller picked up, his voice wasn't filled with rage. It was filled with hesitation. Sir, they've seized the unmarked unit. There's a confidential file inside regarding the Millerstone fraud case, I explained, my heart racing. There was a long pause on the other end. Listen to me carefully, the captain said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Stand down, do not, I repeat, do not engage with the tow yard, go home, we'll handle this internally. Internally? Sir, she assaulted an officer and stole government property. That's an order, Sergeant. Karen's husband is the lead donor for the mayor's re-election campaign. If you make a scene, I can't protect your badge. Walk away. The line went dead. I looked at Karen. She was watching me, a predatory grin on her face. She actually knew she was untouchable. For the first time in my career, I felt like the bad guys were winning. Not because they were smarter, but because they had friends in high places. Karen walked past me, intentionally bumping my shoulder. Better luck next time, officer. Maybe try a bicycle for your next undercover mission. She got into her luxury SUV and drove off, followed by Jimmy in his tow truck. They thought the game was over. They thought they had buried the file and the cop. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just a cop, I was an investigator. And if the department wouldn't let me use my badge, I'd use my brain. I headed back to the apartment complex on foot. I didn't need a car to find out why Karen was so desperate to get me off that specific street. As I walked, I realized the reserved spot wasn't about parking. It was about what was happening in the basement of that building. And I was about to find the one thing Karen's husband couldn't buy his way out of. I didn't go home. My captain's order felt like a betrayal, and in my experience, when a superior tells you to stand down on a Karen, it's because the rot goes all the way to the top. I changed into civilian clothes, jeans, a dark hoodie, and a baseball cap. I went back to the apartment complex, but this time I wasn't the law, I was a ghost. I started talking to the neighbors. At first, they were terrified. But once they realized I wasn't there to hand out tickets, the floodgates opened. It turns out, Karen wasn't just the president of this HOA, she was a tyrant. She's towed 30 cars in the last month, one elderly man told me, looking over his shoulder. Always using Jimmy's recovery. If you don't pay her maintenance fees under the table, your car vanishes. The police, they never come. They say it's a civil matter. I started to see the pattern. Karen and Jimmy weren't just towing cars, they were running a sophisticated extortion racket. But that didn't explain why she targeted a police vehicle. She was entitled, sure, but she wasn't stupid. Or was she? I followed the paper trail to the back of the complex, near the service elevators. That's when I saw it. Jimmy's tow truck was parked in a restricted alleyway, but he wasn't towing anyone. He and Karen were standing behind my seized Ford Explorer. I pulled out my personal phone and started recording. Jimmy had a crowbar. He wasn't just looking for my wallet. He was prying open the evidence lockbox bolted to the floor of the trunk. My heart stopped. That box contained the Miller Stone files, the ones my captain was so nervous about. As the lid popped open, I saw Karen reach in and grab a thick yellow envelope. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked relieved. She pulled out a stack of documents and a USB drive. "This is it," I heard her say through my zoom lens. "With this gone, they can't link the offshore accounts to the mayor's office. Jimmy, burn the rest, scraps the car by morning." It all clicked. Karen wasn't just a neighborhood bully. She was the cleaner. Her husband, the businessman, was the middleman for a massive money laundering scheme, and my unmarked car had accidentally been the one to collect the primary evidence against them. The reserved spot wasn't about parking. It was a dead drop zone. I had parked right on top of their pickup point. I watched as they walked toward Karen's luxury SUV with the stolen federal files. They thought they had won. They thought the Sarge was at home sulking about his badge. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot that my car was a tech package model. Every unmarked unit in my precinct is equipped with a hidden secondary GPS and a 360-degree sentry mode that uploads directly to a secure cloud, not the precinct's server, but a federal task force server. I pulled up my phone app. The record light was still green. I had them on 4K video stealing federal evidence. I looked at the screen and whispered to myself, "Enjoy the files, Karen, because they're the last things you're ever going to see as a free woman." I knew I couldn't go back to my captain. If he was compromised, telling him I had the footage was a death sentence for the investigation. I was officially off-grid. I spent the next 3 hours in a 24-hour diner, using my burner phone to bypass the precinct's firewall. I wasn't looking for help from my department anymore. I was looking for the one person Karen's husband couldn't buy. Special Agent Vance of the FBI, the man whose name was on the header of those stolen files. But Vance was in D.C., and I was here, in a town where the police were paid to look the other way. I needed Karen to incriminate herself further. I needed her to admit on tape what she had taken from that car. So I did something crazy. I called her. She picked up on the third ring. "Who is this?" she snapped. "It's the fake cop, Karen," I said, my voice as smooth as ice. "Listen carefully. I know you have the Miller Stone files, and I know you think you've won. But there's a second USB drive hidden in the headliner of that car. A drive with the real offshore account numbers. Jimmy missed it." There was a dead silence on the line. I could hear her breathing get heavy. "You're lying," she hissed. "Am I? Why do you think the captain told me to stand down? He wants that drive for himself. He's coming for it tonight. If you want to stay out of prison, meet me at the old industrial park in 20 minutes. Bring $50,000 and I'll give you the location of the second drive. If not, I'll give it to the feds myself." I hung up. I didn't want the money. I wanted her to bring the evidence out into the open, away from the protection of her gated community. I arrived at the industrial park. It was pitch black, lit only by a single flickering street lamp. A silver SUV pulled up. Karen stepped out, but she wasn't alone. Her husband, Mr. Mayor's best friend, was with her, and he was holding a 9 handgun. "You're a lot stupider than you look, Sergeant," the husband said, stepping into the light. "There is no second drive. We checked. We just needed you out here where there are no witnesses and no sentry mode." My heart hammered against my ribs. "You're going to kill a cop over a parking spot?" Karen stepped forward, her face twisted in a mask of pure hatred. "It was never about the parking spot. It was about the fact that you dared to look at us like we were regular people. We own this city, and now we own you." She pulled the yellow envelope from her bag, the stolen evidence, and held up a lighter. Once this burns and you're gone, the investigation dies. That's when I smiled. You're right about one thing, Karen, I whispered. There is no second drive, but look up at the water tower behind you. Karen looked up at the water tower, her lighter still flickering near the evidence. For a second there was silence. Then the night sky exploded. Red and blue lights didn't just appear. They flooded the entire industrial park from 3 different directions. FBI, drop the weapon, drop the envelope. The husband's gun hit the gravel before the command even finished. Karen, however, froze. She was still clutching that yellow envelope like it was her life support. She looked at me, then at the 12 SUVs screaming toward us, and then at the sky. You called the feds, she screamed over the sirens. You'll never work in this state again, my husband will. Your husband is currently being recorded on a federal wire, Karen, I said, stepping toward her as the tactical teams swarmed in. And that envelope in your hand, that's not just evidence anymore. That's your one-way ticket to a federal penitentiary for tampering with a witness and theft of government property. The scene was chaos, the beautiful kind. I watched as Special Agent Vance himself walked up to Karen's husband and slapped on the cuffs. No golf with the mayor tonight. But the best part? My captain arrived 5 minutes later looking like he'd seen a ghost. He tried to take charge of the scene, but Vance stopped him with a single hand on his chest. Captain Miller, Vance said, his voice echoing in the empty lot. We've been monitoring your calls for the last 4 hours. You're under investigation for obstruction of justice. Hand over your service weapon. I watched them lead my boss away in the back of a blacked-out SUV. But Karen was the main event. She was sitting on the curb, her neon pink tracksuit covered in dirt, crying, not because she was sorry, but because she had finally met a wall she couldn't shout her way through. It was just a parking spot, she wailed. No, Karen, I replied, leaning down to her level. It was a public street. You just thought you were the queen of it. In the end, the fallout was massive. The HOA was dissolved after an audit revealed Karen had embezzled over $200,000 in fines. Her husband took a plea deal for 12 years to avoid a life sentence. And Jimmy's recovery and towing was shut down, and his fleet was sold at a police auction. I actually bought one of his trucks for the department's training academy. As for me, I got a commendation, a new cruiser, and a permanent parking spot right in front of the precinct. But sometimes on my day off, I drive past that apartment complex. I look at that reserved spot on the street and I smile. Because every time a regular person parks there now, they have no idea that it cost one woman her entire life just to try and save it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this 35-minute journey into the fall of a Karen, hit that subscribe button. And remember, watch where you park because you never know who's sitting behind the wheel.